past couple of weeks, we've been talking about community, about how God's vision for the church has always been for Jesus followers to function like a team, like a squad. Tonight, we'll continue our walk through the book of Ephesians as we try to understand how God's family is supposed to function. But first, a quick recap. Remember, when we talk about the church, we're not talking about a building or an event. We're talking about people all over the world who love and follow Jesus. In Ephesians chapter 1, Paul talked about how the church is God's family and everyone's invited. In chapter 2, Paul talked about how we can forgive and make peace with each other just like God has forgiven and made peace with us through Jesus. Whether it's your favorite sports team, a group project, or your crew in an escape room, I'm sure we can all think of circumstances where a game was won or lost based on how well a team worked together. Some of the words that come to mind when I think about winning teams are teamwork, drive, communication, kindness, encouragement, accountability. When you think about these words, these are not just good things to demonstrate in a game or on a project, but these are things we should be demonstrating in our everyday lives. We all can think of a time you and a group of friends pulled off an epic plan or a well-executed strategy. I'm sure you have some great stories. And so does the church. God's family isn't perfect, but we must never forget God can work through the church in incredible ways. Tonight, we're going to be looking at Ephesians chapter 4. Paul is ready to talk about the nitty-gritty of being the church. He'd already talked about why unity was important, but now he wanted the Ephesians to know how to work together despite their differences. Paul challenged his readers to remember we are part of a bigger team, and when we choose to be unified, we will all grow together toward maturity. So how can God's family act like a team when our team is made up of some pretty imperfect people like you or me or that person you're thinking about right now? Think about a sports team. You need people with different abilities to win, right? Not only does God want us to live at peace with one another, He wants us to understand our roles in the squad. In Ephesians 4, Paul points out some of the roles Jesus followers might have in God's family. In God's family, none of us are going to be naturally gifted at all the things, and that's okay. That's why we're on a team. Growing in our faith is a little bit like solving an escape room. If you've ever attempted to break out of an escape room, you understand what I'm talking about. Working with a team can be chaotic, it can be noisy and challenging at times, but if we tried to do it alone, we'd never finish. Alone, we might be able to get to know God a little bit better or look a little bit more like Jesus, but without a team around us, we'll never grow as much as God designed us to grow. Paul doesn't stop there. Like the believers in Paul's time, maybe you're wondering what exactly it means to grow in your faith. Does it mean accumulating more Bible knowledge? Does it mean going to church more often, feeling more passionate about God? Those are all great pursuits, yet Paul said the real measure of our spiritual growth is in the way we live our lives. Verses 21 through 24 say this: "Surely you heard of him and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus. You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness." The rest of the chapter, Paul continues to lay out what true righteousness and the holy life looks like. When we let Jesus transform us from the inside out, we must continue making choices to become more like Him, to speak the truth, control our anger, be generous with our things and our words, and grow in compassion and kindness and forgiveness. So when we talk about growing in maturity, we're talking about growing in closeness with Jesus and growing more into His image through our actions. We weren't created to grow closer to God alone, and we aren't supposed to grow more into the image of Jesus alone either. When every member of God's family does their part, we'll find ourselves growing in faith together. God designed us to need each other, to function like a team. All alone, we can only go so far, but in God's family, we can grow together. So how do we grow together? I'm looking forward to jumping into our discussion tonight with you. I hope you can join us at 7 o'clock at the church.